In the first chapter, he was giving lecture on dharma to Krishna. The first chapter is Arjuna's lecture to Krishna on dharma, on morality. Now he has understood, he said that I am dharma sammudha chetaha, not only mudha, sammudha. Sammudha means samyak mudha. I am absolutely confused about what is dharma and what is adharma. I am not able to understand, see what is dharma. That is why I am asking you, prichhami tvam. Yat shreyasyan nishchitam bruhitan me. Wherever lies my shreyas, please tell me without any ambiguity. All these words are important. Nishchitam bruhitan me. That means without any ambiguity, so that I can understand. Clear, no ambiguous instruction. Yat shreyasyat. This shreyas, I have discussed about it yesterday, I think. Shreyas and prayers. That is where lies the auspicious goal. Now, when he is saying that I want to know from you where lies my shreyas, it means he is a real seeker. Otherwise, he will not look for shreyas. He will say that where lies my prayers, how I will win my war, how I will get the kingdom, how we will be able to defeat the others. All those questions would have been there. But his mind was set on the shreyas. That although he was confused, but his goal was set on shreyas. So please tell me where lies my auspicious goal. Yat shreyasyat nishchitam bruhitanme, not with any ambiguity. Clearly you tell me. And why will you tell? Why anybody will give you that advice, where lies the shreyas? Normally, only when he finds Krishna finds a receptive devotee, then only he will say. So this last line is very important. This is the first time such a statement coming from Arjuna's mouth. Shishyasteham. So far he was thinking, I am Krishna's friend. With lot of pride he asked him to become his charioteer. Will we ask our guru to drive the car? I will sit as the master of the car and ask guru to drive the car. That was what he did in the beginning of the war. He asked Krishna to drive the chariot. And he became the charioteer. Now he is saying that I am your shishya, I am your disciple. This is the first confession, first time he is confessing. Shadhi mam, you give me the discipline, shasana. Shasana means instruction, discipline. You give me the discipline, what am I supposed to follow? And why will you give? Tvam prapannam. This is most important word. Tvam prapannam. Prapannam means I have taken your refuge. I have taken my refuge in you. After this the guru cannot deny a disciple. If it is a truthful statement, if he takes ashraya, takes refuge in the guru, then the guru has all the responsibility to guide the disciple. As long as he takes the refuge. One day if he says that I had taken refuge but I no more have your refuge, then guru is freed of his responsibility. Because only when he takes the refuge he can guide him. So this prapannam, this ashraya, you will find in the Shastras, it is again and again in all the Shastras it has been emphasized. Because that takes away the ego and that makes us an instrument in the hands of the divine. So we can proceed with the divine order straightforward. When this ashraya bodha. What is surrender? Surrender we say. Surrender is not saying that I have surrendered everything to God as we say. Surrender is an ashraya bodha in us. You understand ashraya bodha, that the feeling of refuge. When you have surrendered to God, you will feel just like a child in the mother's lap. Can you understand the psychology? The child in the mother's lap. That I have taken refuge in God. So I don't have to worry about anything. Whatever comes, we will accept. Whatever goes, I will accept. I will be happy with anything. Beyond that, there is nothing. So surrender, real surrender means you can judge your surrender, whether I have surrendered or not, from this feeling of refuge in you. From the ashraya bodha in us. It is a bodha, it is a feeling in us of feeling the refuge, and we feel secure in any condition. Even if death is coming, we will feel secure. I will embrace death. If the death comes, I will embrace death. As I embrace life, I will embrace death also. So this last line is very important. It shows the surrender of Arjuna. And because of that only, then further explanation also is there in the second, that he is further saying that I am not interested in anything. This grief I am suffering from, I understand that it will not go even if I have the kingship of the entire world. Then also it is not going to do. By any material gain, I will not be able to get rid of this grief and all. All these statements are there, which shows that he is only interested in how he will reach the auspicious goal, Shreyas. And then after that, in second chapter, from 11th verse, the instruction started. Now, in the beginning of the instruction, he spoke about the truth of our Atma. What is the real identity we have? That is the highest point of the knowledge. Who am I and what is Brahman, the ultimate reality? It was a very high philosophy for anybody like Arjuna at that point. That is called Sankhya. This Sankhya means Samyak Khyayate iti Sankhya. That means which pervades everything, without which nothing can be. That is called Sankhya. That is the truth, the consciousness, Brahman, whatever you may say. That is the truth which is all pervading reality. So the philosophy of that Sankhya is called Sankhya. So this second chapter up to the 39th verse, in the 39th verse he says, Esha tebhi hita sankhye buddhir yoge tvimam shrinu buddhya yukto yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi. He said, up to this I have told you what is that Sankhya. That means, here Sankhya means actually the knowledge, the Jnana Yoga as we say. There is another Sankhya, those who are interested in it, it is called Kapila Sankhya. That's a philosophy. Kapil Muni had given that philosophy that is also called Sankhya. It is not Bhagavad Gita Sankhya, meaning is not that. It is not Kapila Sankhya. Here Sankhya means the Jnana Yoga, the Vedanta. Simply the Jnana Yoga of Vedanta. Now here in this 39th verse of second chapter, he said that up to this point I have told you about this knowledge of who am I and what is the ultimate reality. Now I will tell you about the yoga. Yoga means the Bhagavad Gita yoga. He will define yoga and he will speak about yoga thereafter. So this verse also is important, where he says, Buddhya yukto yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi. We say karma yoga. We are doing karma out of the motivation of fulfilling some desire, that thinking that by doing this, getting the result, I will become happy. This is the delusion. Why am I calling it delusion? You look around the world, the present, past, in any number of years, has anybody become permanently happy by doing anything in the world? Any gain, I will become rich and then I will become happy. You ask people after becoming really rich, how many people have become happy or lesser happy? If he becomes the second in the world, he wants to become first, the richest person in the world. If he has 10 buildings, he wants 15 buildings. If at all anybody has become happy, it is not because of the riches or not because of the fame and not because of any material gain. It is by dealing with his mind, treating his mind, by making it contented or desireless, that one can become happy. By fulfilling any desire, one cannot become happy. This third chapter will tell us that it is like fire. The more ghee you pour in the fire is wanting to blaze forth. The more ghee you put into the fire, it burns even more. Like that is our kama, our desires. You try to fulfill by giving it all kinds of sense enjoyment, it will want all the more. It cannot be satiated by that. So, he says that there lies the truth, that happiness, the carrot of happiness we are always running after. That is only because of a delusion, because of a misunderstanding. that we think by getting it I will become happy. We have discussed about it. Swamiji also has told so many, so I feel a little reluctant about repeating the same things, but still we have to say that what happens to the mind is that what makes us happy is that suppose you have some desire. When the desire is fulfilled for a few minutes or days or seconds, etc., for some time, there is no desire in the mind. So the desirelessness of the mind gives you the happiness. Not the fulfillment of the desire, but the elimination of the desire. Do you mark my point? We think that by fulfillment the desire will go, but it doesn't go. Immediately some other desires come in. But if you can eliminate the desire right in the beginning, you become happy. Right there. Because it is the elimination of the desire which makes us happy. Suppose you go to a very beautiful place, Himalayas or in front of the ocean or so. You feel so happy suddenly. Particularly if it is the first time you are going there. Because all your thoughts, worldly thoughts, your gains and losses, everything has been replaced by what you are seeing in front. So you feel happy. Now, if you stay in that place for more than 7 days or so, will you be happy seeing that scene anymore? Do you ask the people who are staying near the shore or staying in the Himalayas? They are thinking of how to get some money from these tourists or how to make this, make that, etc. Now suppose you are seeing, even let us take a direct example, you are seeing the ocean and you are very happy. Right then the information comes that you have lost your job or you have lost your son or daughter or anybody like that. Will not the mind immediately collapse? You will become unhappy. What has gone wrong? The sea is still there or the Himalayas are still there in front? If the happiness lay in the Himalayas, it would have been still made you happy. The happiness is an offshoot of the mind when the mind is free of its worldliness, the distractions and the agitations created by the worldliness, not by the world, by the worldliness of our mind, by our raga dvesha, by our clinging to what we like and hating what we dislike. That is causing the agitation in the mind. The happiness comes when that agitation subsides. That happens with the elimination of the desire. So if we can eliminate the desire right in the beginning, then we will be always happy. That doesn't mean that you will not do anything. You will do out of your happiness. You will not think that by doing this I will become happy, that is why I am doing. You will do out of happiness. Whoever comes, you will help. Whatever to be done, you will do. Whatever you can do, you will do. That is why Bhagavad Gita repeatedly says that Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha, Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. So, rather than looking for joy, by doing something and thinking that I will become joyous only when we get the result of the work, we start working out of joy. Not working for joy, but working out of joy, from joy. So the joy becomes permanent. If you are successful or you fail, then also you are working out of joy. Sometimes there will be failure, sometimes there will be success, sometimes there will be a mixture of the two. That will come automatically following the material causality. That you don't have to think about it. You plan well. You ask any number of people that I am going to do this, how best it can be done. You think, try to perform best. It may not, finally you may not get the best result, something may happen. But whatever you are doing, you are planning out of joy, you are working out of joy. If the result comes, then also you are accepting out of joy. If there is a failure, then also you accept it joyously. Think, how can the failure be avoided next time? Everything you can do, but not thinking that I will get that carrot of happiness after this is performed and I get this result. Is it meaningful or not? So the whole Bhagavad Gita is this change of the attitude. It is not karma. Karma becomes yoga when we change this attitude. We replace this carrot of happiness by an understanding of the reality. That where lies happiness and how I can always remain happy. If this understanding gets settled, that is the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. Then you can do anything, anywhere. Now, for this you have to remain active. Otherwise you will never know how you are. Suppose you go out in a cave and do your tapasya, then you will not know what are the defects lying in your mind, what are the desires and other things. Only when you are interacting you will come to know them. Suppose you have a tendency to blame people, criticize people. If you remain in a cave, it will never be tested. Only when you become interactive, you find out that these constrictions are there, the karpanya dosha, whatever you have, will be exposed. So the whole philosophy of Bhagavad Gita is not to eliminate action. This is very important because in third chapter begins with this, that there are two margas, two very prominent margas. Marga means the path. One is called Kevala Jnana Nishtha. Kevala Jnana Nishtha means exclusive knowledge pursuit. That means they will not be generally interactive in the world. They will only study, listen, think, meditate, contemplate. By that they go. Now all are not fit for that. If suppose we ask you to meditate, most of you will not be able to meditate. You will say that mind runs around here and there. I am not able to meditate. If we ask you to read the scriptures also, you will say, no, the mind doesn't remain there. Somebody should explain, then only we get interest. Otherwise we don't get any interest. So everybody is not fit for Kevala Jnana Nishtha. Very few people are fit for that. Those who are basically desireless, those who do not have much desire for any word, and free of worldliness, so to say, they can take to Kevala Jnana Nishtha. But for all others, will the ultimate goal be then, all others will be deprived? No. Bhagavad Gita's revolutionary treatment is that, revolutionary presentation is that the same goal as the Upanishadic exclusive knowledge pursuit promises, that goal Bhagavad Gita promises for others also. And that is through an interactional life, with only one change incorporated in their mind, that the attitude with which he is doing the action, whatever field he is working, only his attitude has to be changed in this manner. Then, whatever his activities are, that will become an instrument for liberation. This sentence is very important. We generally consider the actions to be hindrance to our knowledge or liberation. That is why for the knowledge practitioners it is so, they don't like to do anything in the interactive world also, normally practitioners. So there is a common concept that spiritual sadhana means coming away from the activity. This is the greatest misunderstanding our country is suffering from. And if you look further back, actually Baba one day, our Gurudev Baba one day told me that actually this thinking that Adhyatmikata is taking us away from life, it has been incorporated by Shukracharya, who was a guru of the Asuras. Because good people, if they are taken away from the life, then the Asura will rule, the bad people will rule the world. So Shukracharya instituted that kind of a sannyasa where people will be living the worldly activities. The kings also will living their kingdom, and only the Asuras will rule. There is a lot of truth in what he said. He said that our guru is Brihaspati. Brihaspati means? The Brihaspati is the guru, knowledge guru. He never asks us to come away from the life. He wants the divinization of life. So Brihaspati's instruction is to the Devas, and Shukracharya was the Asura guru and Brihaspati was the guru of the Devas. Now we are not supposed to, in the Upanishads also if you read properly, it is not coming away from life. They have divinized the life. Everywhere in Upanishad it is the divinizing the life. How to divinize the life? Not leaving the life and coming away and remaining in the cave. Well, for some time we may have to understand the truth, we may have to leave, we may have to go to meditation or a secluded life, seclusion. That is only to gain the knowledge. But once a person has become a knower, or he has already crossed through whatever was needed as sadhana, then he can very well be active in the world for the sarva bhuta hite rataha, for the welfare of everybody, every being. So, these two margas, two path, that is, one is exclusive knowledge pursuit or kevala jnana nishtha, the other is the karma yoga of Bhagavad Gita, where the interactions are taken to be the sadhana to cleanse our mind, free our mind of all the desires, all the constrictions, all the doshas we say, means constrictions, lepanas, the taints from the mind. And when we are active, then only we come to know our mind properly. If you don't interact with people, we will not come to know. Where are the restrictions? To some people, we don't even like to talk, like to speak. Now, is it right? If you exclude somebody from yourself, that I don't like to speak to him, that means you are restricting yourself. You are not allowing yourself to spread in others. But the real self is not that. Real self is all pervading, all embracing. So you cannot realize the self in that case, because of your self-imposed restriction, that you are curtailing your spreading of the mind. Normally your self is everywhere, with everybody. All are there, all embracive. So interactions will tell us where all we have the karpanya dosha, where all we have the constrictions, where the treatments have to be applied. All these things are discussed in detail in 3rd chapter. Now let us go to the 3rd chapter. We will come back again to the fundamental discussions. We have to also come back again and again to 2nd chapter. Arjuna vacha jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tatkim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tatkim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava vyamishreneva vakyena buddhim mohyasiva me tadekam vada nishchitya yena shreyohamapnuyam. See, this is Arjuna's question. The beginning of the chapter is Arjuna's question in these 2 shlokas. Now you see here the last word again. Yena shreyaha aham apnuyam. By which I will attain the shreyas. I told you that in the 2nd chapter, 7th verse, that was the fundamental verse on which the message could start. Here again he is confirming that by which I will attain the shreyas. He is a seeker of shreyas. Once a person is seriously a seeker of shreyas, then he does not have to do much sadhana. It will automatically proceed. But we are not seeker of shreyas. We are seeker of prayers, and we want along with that, if the shreyas can be had, is very good. That is, we want the prayers. Prayers means whatever is pleasant, the comfort, the fame, some appreciation from people, money, comfort, so many other things. They are all prayers. We don't want to opt for shreyas without, not looking at any of the prayers, that whether the prayers come or not, I don't mind. I am a seeker of shreyas. When we can confirm that I am a seeker of shreyas, then he becomes a real seeker. Now here he says, O Keshava, Arjuna is saying, Janardana, chet karmanaha buddhihi jyayasi. Jyayasi means superior, Shrestha. That, O Janardana is Krishna, Keshava also is Krishna. Both are Sambodhana. O Janardana, O Keshava. Two Sambodhanas are there. O Janardana, if the knowledge is superior to activity, action, according to you, that you have been telling like that, in the second chapter you have spoken like that, tat kim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi, O Keshava. Then why are you involving me, putting me into this ghora karma? Ghora karma means the war is a ghora karma. That means it needs the maximum possible involvement. All kinds of agitation, distraction and whatnot.